The stranger rode into Fort Davis, Texas, on a horse as battered and broken as he was. And Delilah Owens knew from the moment she saw him slumped in that saddle that something inside him had shattered beyond what most folks could fix. The August heat of 1878 beat down mercilessly on the dusty Main Street, and Delilah had been sweeping the porch of her small boarding house when the sound of labored hoofbeats drew her attention. The rider sat hunched forward, his dark hat pulled low, shoulders curved inward like he was protecting something wounded in his chest. His clothes were trail-worn and dust-covered, but it was not the dirt or the exhaustion that caught her eye. It was the heaviness in his posture, the way he moved like a man carrying the weight of the entire world and finding it too much to bear. She set her broom aside and stepped down from the porch, drawn by an instinct she could not name. As the rider approached, she could see more details. He was young, perhaps close to her own 23 years, with dark hair curling from beneath his hat, and several days of stubble shadowing his jaw. His eyes, when they finally lifted to meet hers, were the color of storm clouds, and they held a pain so raw and immediate that she felt it like a physical blow. "Excuse me, miss," he said, his voice rough and low. "Is there somewhere nearby I can stable my horse and find a room?" Delilah studied him for a moment, taking in the way his hands trembled slightly on the reins, the tight line of his mouth, the careful way he held himself like someone barely keeping control. "I have rooms here," she said gently, "and there is a stable just around back. You look like you could use a rest." He nodded once, a jerky motion, and dismounted with visible effort. Up close, she could see he was taller than she had realized, lean and broad-shouldered beneath the travel-worn shirt. He swayed slightly when his feet hit the ground, and she stepped forward instinctively, ready to steady him if needed. "I am fine," he said quickly, though they both knew it was not true. "Just tired, been riding for days." "What is your name?" she asked. There was a pause long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then he said, Caleb Foster. "I am Delilah Owens. Come on inside once you have settled your horse. I will get you something to eat and show you to a room." She watched as he led the exhausted animal toward the stable, moving with the automatic motions of someone who had done this task 1,000 times, but was barely present for it now. There was something broken in Caleb Foster, something more than physical exhaustion, and Delilah felt the pull of it in her chest. She had always been the type to help, to heal, to offer comfort where it was needed. Her mother used to say she had too soft a heart for the harsh realities of the West, but Delilah had never seen kindness as a weakness. She went back inside and started preparing a meal, heating up the stew she had made earlier and slicing fresh bread from the morning's baking. Her boarding house was small but comfortable, just 6 rooms upstairs and her own quarters on the ground floor. She had inherited it from her aunt 2 years ago and had been running it alone ever since, taking in travelers and occasional long-term boarders. It was a simple life, but it was hers, and she took pride in offering people a clean, welcoming place to stay in this rough frontier town. 20 minutes later, Caleb appeared in the doorway of the dining room, hat in hand. He had splashed water on his face and attempted to brush some of the trail dust from his clothes, but he still looked exhausted. More than that, he looked haunted. "Sit down," Delilah said, gesturing to the table. "You need food." He obeyed without argument, sinking into the chair like his legs could barely hold him anymore. She set the bowl of stew and the bread before him, along with a cup of coffee, and watched as he stared at the food for a moment as though unsure what to do with it. "Eat," she said softly. "Please." He picked up the spoon with a hand that shook and began to eat mechanically. Delilah sat across from him, her own coffee cup between her hands, and waited. She had learned that sometimes people needed silence before they needed words. After several minutes, Caleb said without looking up, "How much for the room?" $2 a week, meals included, or 50 cents a night if you are not staying long. I do not know how long I will stay. His voice was flat, emotionless. Maybe a few days, maybe longer. That is fine. You can pay as you go. He nodded and continued eating. The silence stretched between them, but it was not uncomfortable. Delilah found herself studying his face, seeing past the exhaustion and the pain to the handsome features beneath. He had a strong jaw, a straight nose, and those remarkable gray eyes that seemed to hold storms. There was something about him that called to her, something that made her want to reach across the table and tell him that whatever had broken him could be mended. When he finished eating, he looked up at her for the first time since sitting down. "Thank you," he said, and there was genuine gratitude in his voice. "That was good. You are welcome. Let me show you to your room." She led him upstairs to one of the front rooms, the best she had available. It was simply furnished with a bed, a washstand, a chair, and a small desk, but the linens were clean and the window let in good light. "There is fresh water in the pitcher," she said. "If you need anything else, I will be downstairs." Caleb stood in the middle of the room, still holding his saddlebags, looking lost. "Miss Owens," he said suddenly, "I appreciate your kindness. I am not sure I deserve it, but I appreciate it." The word struck her as odd and concerning. "Everyone deserves kindness, Mr. Foster." He smiled then, but it was the saddest smile she had ever seen. "I am not sure that is true." Before she could respond, he turned away, dismissing her gently but firmly. Delilah left the room, closing the door softly behind her, her mind spinning with questions. What had happened to this man? What burden was he carrying that made him doubt his own worth? She went about her evening chores, preparing dinner for her other boarders. There were 3 others currently staying in the house. An older gentleman named Mr. Peterson who worked at the general store, a young couple passing through on their way to California, and a school teacher named Miss Hartley, who had taken a long-term room while she taught at the local school. They all gathered for dinner, but Caleb did not appear and Delilah did not disturb him. He needed rest more than he needed food right now. That night, as she lay in her own bed, she heard footsteps pacing overhead. Back and forth, the slow, measured tread of someone who could not sleep, who could not find peace. The sound continued for hours, and Delilah's heart ached for him. She knew the sound of grief and guilt. She had heard it before in her own footsteps after her parents died in a cholera outbreak 5 years ago. The next morning, she woke early as always and began preparing breakfast. She was mixing batter for pancakes when she heard footsteps on the stairs and turned to see Caleb standing in the doorway. He looked even worse than the day before, his eyes red-rimmed and shadowed, his face pale beneath the tan. "Good morning," she said gently. "Did you sleep?" "Not much." He moved into the room slowly as if his body hurt. "I am sorry if I disturbed you with my pacing." "You did not disturb me," she lied. "Sit down. I will have breakfast ready soon." He sat at the table and she poured him coffee. This time, he wrapped both hands around the cup as if trying to draw warmth from it despite the summer heat. Delilah continued cooking, stealing glances at him when she thought he would not notice. In the morning light, she could see a fading bruise along his jaw and what looked like healing cuts on his knuckles. He had been in a fight, she realized, and probably not that long ago. "Are you from around here?" she asked, keeping her voice casual as she flipped pancakes. "No. I am from Kansas originally. Worked on a ranch up near Dodge City." "What brings you to Fort Davis?" There was a long silence and she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "I needed to get away, put some distance between me and my past." Delilah brought plates to the table and sat down across from him. Sometimes distance helps, she said. Sometimes it does not. Depends on whether you are running from something outside you or something inside you. His eyes snapped up to meet hers, startled. You are very direct, Miss Owens. I have found that dancing around the truth does not help anyone, but I am not trying to pry. You do not have to tell me anything you do not want to. He looked down at his plate, picking up his fork. There was a woman, he said suddenly, the words seeming to burst from him against his will. Her name was Sarah. We were supposed to get married. Delilah waited, her heart already aching for what she knew was coming. She died, Caleb continued, his voice rough. 3 weeks ago. There was a fire in the town. The hotel where she was staying caught fire and she was trapped on the 2nd floor. I tried to get to her. I tried so hard. He held up his hands, and Delilah saw the healing burns on his palms, marks that she had mistaken for cuts. I could not reach her. The smoke was too thick, the flames too high. I could hear her screaming for help, and I could not get to her. Oh, Caleb, Delilah whispered, using his first name without thinking. I am so sorry. I failed her. His voice broke on the words. I was supposed to protect her, to take care of her, and I failed. She died because I was not strong enough, not fast enough. I should have saved her. You did everything you could. You nearly died yourself trying. But I lived and she died. The words came out harsh, anguished. That is not right. That is not how it was supposed to be. We had plans. We were going to buy a small ranch, raise horses, have a family. And now she is gone and I am here, and I do not understand why I am still alive when she is not. Delilah reached across the table and covered his burned hand with her own. Because you survived. Because that is what happened, through no fault of your own. You cannot control fate, Caleb. You cannot always save everyone, no matter how much you love them or how hard you try. He pulled his hand away, standing abruptly. You do not understand. I should have done more. I should have been faster. I should have. His voice broke entirely, and he turned away, his shoulders shaking. Delilah stood and moved to him, not touching him but standing close enough that he would know she was there. You are right, she said softly. I do not understand exactly what you are feeling. I have not lost someone in that specific way, but I have lost people I loved. I know what it is like to wish you could turn back time, to have one more chance to do things differently. And I know that carrying that guilt will destroy you if you let it. Maybe I deserve to be destroyed, he said, his voice muffled. No, you deserve to heal. You deserve to remember Sarah with love instead of guilt. You deserve to find a way to live again. He turned to face her, and the raw vulnerability in his eyes made her breath catch. I do not know how to do that. Let me help you, she said. The words came out before she could think about them, but once they were spoken, she knew they were true. Let me heal your heart. He stared at her for a long moment, and she saw 100 emotions cross his face. Disbelief, hope, fear, longing. You do not even know me. I know enough. I know you are a good man who is suffering. I know you tried to save the woman you loved, even at the risk of your own life. I know you are carrying a burden that is too heavy for one person to bear alone. Let me help you carry it. Why would you do that for a stranger? Delilah smiled sadly. Because someone needs to, and because I think maybe we are not meant to be strangers. The other boarders came down for breakfast then, breaking the intensity of the moment. Caleb quickly wiped his eyes and moved back to the table, and Delilah returned to serving food. But something had shifted between them. An understanding, a connection, the first fragile thread of something that could grow into more if they nurtured it carefully. Over the next few days, Delilah made it her quiet mission to draw Caleb out of his grief, bit by bit. She did not push him to talk, but she made sure he was not alone unless he wanted to be. She brought him meals when he forgot to eat. She sat on the porch with him in the evenings, sharing comfortable silence or easy conversation about nothing important. She showed him around Fort Davis, introducing him to the town and its people, giving him small tasks that would keep his hands busy and his mind occupied. Caleb responded slowly, like a plant reaching toward sunlight after too long in darkness. He began to sleep a little better. The haunted look in his eyes softened, though it never completely disappeared. He started to smile occasionally, small, fleeting expressions that Delilah treasured like precious gifts. One evening about a week after his arrival, they were sitting on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Caleb said suddenly, "Tell me about yourself." "I have been so wrapped up in my own pain that I have not asked you anything about your life." Delilah considered her words carefully. "There is not that much to tell. I grew up here in Fort Davis. My father was a cavalry officer stationed at the fort, and my mother ran a small dress shop. When they died of cholera 5 years ago, I went to live with my aunt. She ran this boarding house, and when she passed 2 years ago, she left it to me. I have been running it ever since." "Do you have any other family?" "No, I had a brother, but he died as a child. It has just been me for a while now." Caleb looked at her with new understanding. "So you know what it is like to lose people." "Yes, everyone does out here. Death is part of life in the West, but that does not make it easier." "How did you survive it? The grief?" She thought about that. "I kept moving forward. I found purpose in taking care of this place, in taking care of the people who stay here. I let myself feel the sadness when it came, but I did not let it consume me. And I held on to hope that there would be good things in my future, even if I could not see them yet." "And have there been good things?" She looked at him, at the way the setting sun caught the gray of his eyes and turned them silver. "Yes," she said softly, "there have been." He held her gaze, and she saw the moment he understood what she meant. Something flickered in his expression, something warm and alive that had not been there before. Then he looked away, clearing his throat. "I do not know if I can do this, Delilah." "Do what?" "This. Whatever this is between us. I can still see Sarah's face every time I close my eyes. I can still hear her voice. I feel like if I let myself care about someone else, I am betraying her memory." Delilah reached over and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Loving someone new does not mean you loved her any less. It does not erase what you had with her or dishonor her memory. She would want you to be happy, would she not? To live a full life. I think so. Yes, she was always telling me not to be so serious, to enjoy life more." His voice broke slightly on the words. "Then honor her memory by doing that. By healing. By opening your heart to the possibility of happiness again. What if I cannot? What if this grief has broken something in me that cannot be fixed? Then we will deal with that together. But I do not think you are as broken as you believe you are. I think you are grieving, which is different. Grief is natural and necessary. Being broken means you cannot function, cannot feel, cannot heal. But you are doing all of those things slowly. You are already healing, Caleb. You just do not realize it yet." He squeezed her hand, and they sat in silence as the sun finished setting and the stars began to emerge. Delilah felt the rightness of this moment, of his hand in hers, of the quiet understanding between them. She had not been looking for love when he rode into town. In fact, she had convinced herself that she was content with her solitary life, that she did not need romance or companionship beyond the fleeting interactions with her boarders. But Caleb had awakened something in her, a longing she had not known existed. The next morning, Caleb came down to breakfast looking more rested than she had yet seen him. "I want to find work," he announced. "I cannot just sit around indefinitely. I need to do something useful." "What kind of work are you looking for?" "I am good with horses. I worked as a ranch hand for years, training and breaking horses mainly. Is there anywhere around here that might need someone with those skills?" Delilah thought for a moment. The Mexicans down at the livery stable are always busy. You could talk to them. Or there is a ranch about 10 miles outside of town owned by a man named James Reynolds. He might need help. I will try both. Thank you. After breakfast, Caleb headed into town to inquire about work. Delilah watched him go, noting the straighter set of his shoulders, the more purposeful stride. He was finding his way back to himself, and she was glad for it, even as she worried about what it might mean for them. Would he leave Fort Davis once he was healed? Would he thank her kindly for her help and ride off to start a new life somewhere else? She tried not to think about it as she went about her daily tasks, but the fear lingered at the edges of her mind. She had opened her heart to him, had let herself care, and now she was vulnerable in a way she had not been in years. Caleb returned in the late afternoon with good news. Mr. Reynolds has hired me to work with his horses. He has several that need breaking and some young stock that needs training. It is good pay, and he said I can stay in the bunkhouse if I want, but I told him I have a room here in town. You did. Delilah could not keep the pleasure from her voice. He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. I did. If that is all right with you, I would like to stay here if you will have me. Of course I will have you. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning beyond their surface simplicity. Caleb's smile softened into something tender. Good, he said quietly. That is good. He started work at the Reynolds Ranch the next day, leaving early in the morning and returning in the evening. The work was physical and demanding, and it seemed to help him. He came home tired but satisfied, and slowly the shadows began to lift from his eyes. He and Delilah fell into an easy routine. He would help her with chores around the boarding house in the mornings before he left for work, and in the evenings they would share dinner and then sit on the porch, talking until the stars filled the sky. Their conversations ranged over everything and nothing. He told her about growing up in Kansas, about his parents who had died of scarlet fever when he was 16, about the years he spent drifting from ranch to ranch learning his trade. She told him about her childhood in Fort Davis, about helping her mother in the dress shop and learning to sew, about the year she spent in San Antonio attending a school for young ladies before her parents died and she had to return home. They talked about their dreams and fears, their beliefs and doubts. He confessed that he sometimes wondered if there was any greater meaning to life, or if people just made up stories to comfort themselves against the darkness. She told him about her faith, which had been tested by loss but had ultimately sustained her, and about her belief that there was goodness in the world worth fighting for. "You are an optimist," he said one evening, but he said it with affection rather than criticism. "I am a realist who chooses to focus on the good," she corrected. "There is plenty of bad in the world. I cannot change that, but I can choose to be a force for good in my own small corner of it. I can choose to offer kindness and hope to the people who cross my path. That is not naive optimism. That is a deliberate choice. You have chosen to offer that to me," he said, his voice soft. "Why? Because you needed it, and because I wanted to." He reached for her hand and she gave it willingly. They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped, watching the night deepen around them. Delilah felt her heart expanding in her chest, making room for feelings she had not expected. She was falling in love with Caleb Foster, with his wounded heart and his gentle strength and his slow, blooming smiles. She was falling in love, and she was terrified and exhilarated all at once. A month after Caleb arrived in Fort Davis, the annual town dance was held to celebrate the end of summer. It was a simple affair, held in the largest barn on the edge of town, with fiddle music and homemade refreshments and all the townspeople dressed in their best clothes. Delilah had not planned to attend, but Miss Hartley insisted she come, and Caleb surprised her by offering to escort her. "You do not have to do that," Delilah said, flustered. "I know social gatherings probably are not easy for you right now." "I want to," he said firmly. "Besides, you have done so much for me. The least I can do is make sure you have a partner for the dance." So Delilah found herself getting ready with more care than usual, putting on her best dress, a deep blue cotton with white lace at the collar and cuffs, and pinning up her dark hair. When she came downstairs, Caleb was waiting for her in the front hall, and the look in his eyes when he saw her made her breath catch. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you. You look very nice yourself," he did. He had bought new clothes with his first wages from the ranch, and the dark trousers and crisp white shirt made him look like a different man from the broken stranger who had ridden into town weeks ago. He was clean-shaven, his dark hair neatly combed, and the haunted look had faded from his eyes, replaced by something warmer. They walked to the dance together in the warm evening air, Delilah's hand resting lightly in the crook of his elbow. The barn was already crowded with people when they arrived, the fiddle music spilling out into the night. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a golden glow over everything. The air smelled of hay and wood smoke and the flowers that decorated the tables. For a while they stood on the edge of the crowd, watching other couples dance. Delilah was content just to be there with Caleb, but then a slow waltz began, and he turned to her with a question in his eyes. "Will you dance with me?" "I would love to." He led her onto the makeshift dance floor and took her in his arms with surprising confidence. Delilah had not expected him to be a good dancer, but he moved with easy grace, guiding her through the steps with assurance. They swayed together to the music, and she felt the warmth of his hand on her waist, the strength of his shoulder beneath her palm. The rest of the world seemed to fade away until there was just the two of them, moving together in perfect harmony. "Where did you learn to dance?" she asked, tilting her head back to look up at him. "My mother taught me. She said every man should know how to waltz properly, that it was a mark of civilization." He smiled at the memory. "I thought it was silly at the time, but I am glad she insisted now." "So am I." They danced through several songs, and Delilah felt like she was floating. She had never been this close to Caleb before, had never felt the solid warmth of him, the way their bodies fit together as if made for this. When he looked down at her, his gray eyes were soft and full of emotion. "Delilah," he said quietly, his lips close to her ear so she could hear him over the music. "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I am falling in love with you." Her heart stuttered, then raced. "Caleb, I know it has not been long. I know I am probably supposed to wait longer after Sarah to grieve properly, but I cannot help how I feel. You have brought me back to life. You have given me hope when I thought I would never feel hope again. You have healed my heart, just like you said you would. And I am falling in love with you, and I need you to know that." Delilah felt tears prick her eyes. "I am falling in love with you too." He stopped dancing, standing still in the middle of the moving couples. "You are?" "Yes, I have been for weeks now. I was just afraid to say anything, afraid it was too soon, afraid you would not feel the same." "I feel the same," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "God, Delilah, I feel the same." He pulled her close, right there in front of everyone, and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, tender and sweet, but it held all the promise of everything they could be together. Delilah kissed him back, her hands coming up to frame his face, and felt her whole world shift and settle into a new configuration with Caleb at its center. When they finally broke apart, they were both smiling. Around them, the other dancers had given them space, and there were a few knowing looks and soft smiles from the townspeople who had watched them grow closer over the past month. Delilah felt her cheeks flush, but she could not bring herself to be embarrassed. She was too happy, too full of joy to care what anyone else thought. They left the dance early, walking back to the boarding house hand in hand under the stars. On the porch, Caleb pulled her into his arms again, holding her close. "I want to court you properly," he said. "I want to do this right. You deserve that." "We have been courting in a way," Delilah pointed out. "These past weeks, spending time together, getting to know each other." "That is courting, is it not?" "I suppose it is. But I want everyone to know my intentions are honorable. I want to marry you, Delilah, not right away, not until you are ready, but eventually. I want to build a life with you." "I want that too," she whispered. "More than anything." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Delilah felt the future opening up before them like a beautiful unexplored country. She had healed his broken heart, and in doing so, she had found her own heart's desire. It seemed almost too perfect, too good to be true, but she chose to believe in it. She chose hope and love and the possibility of happiness. The weeks that followed were some of the best of Delilah's life. Caleb continued working at the Reynolds ranch, but now everyone knew they were courting, and there was no hiding the joy that radiated from both of them. He would bring her wildflowers he found on his rides to and from the ranch. She would pack special lunches for him to take to work. They went on walks together on Sunday afternoons, exploring the hills around Fort Davis. They attended church together, sitting side by side in the back pew, their shoulders touching. Caleb still had difficult days, times when the memories of Sarah and the fire would wash over him and pull him under. But now he knew he did not have to face those moments alone. He would come to Delilah, and she would hold him while he grieved, offering comfort without judgment. She understood that healing was not linear, that he could love her while still mourning the woman he had lost. She did not feel threatened by Sarah's memory. Instead, she felt grateful that Caleb had loved so deeply before, because it meant he knew how to love, and he was choosing to love her now. 3 months after he had ridden into Fort Davis broken and hurting, Caleb asked Delilah to marry him. It was a simple proposal, made on the porch where they had spent so many evenings together. He did not have a ring yet, but he had words and love and a lifetime of devotion to offer her. "I know I am not a wealthy man," he said, holding both her hands in his. "I am just a ranch hand and I do not have much to give you, but I will work hard every day to provide for you. I will cherish you and protect you and love you for as long as I live. Will you marry me, Delilah?" "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married 6 weeks later in a small ceremony at the church in Fort Davis. It was November now, the heat of summer long gone, replaced by cool, pleasant days and cold nights. Delilah wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, with lace at the collar and pearl buttons down the front. Caleb wore a new suit he had bought specially for the occasion. Miss Hartley and Mr. Reynolds stood up as witnesses, and the small church was filled with friends from the town. As Delilah walked down the aisle toward Caleb, she felt her heart overflow with gratitude and love. He stood waiting for her at the altar, his gray eyes shining with emotion, and she knew with absolute certainty that this was right. They had both known loss and grief, had both walked through valleys of darkness, but they had found each other and found healing in that connection. Now they would walk forward together into whatever the future held. The vows they spoke were traditional, but they infused them with personal meaning. When Caleb promised to love her in sickness and in health, for better or worse, she heard the echo of his past pain and his commitment to not let fear stop him from loving again. When she promised to honor and cherish him all the days of her life, she meant that she would continue to be a safe place for him, a source of comfort and strength. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and told Caleb he could kiss his bride, The kiss they shared was tender and full of promise. The small congregation applauded, and Delilah and Caleb walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, their faces glowing with happiness. There was a simple reception at the boarding house afterward, with food and music and dancing. Delilah had closed the boarding house to guests for the weekend so they could celebrate with their friends. It was a joyful afternoon, full of laughter and good wishes. Mr. Reynolds made a toast, saying that he had never seen a man recover from heartbreak as thoroughly as Caleb had, and that it was clear Delilah was the reason for that transformation. "To the bride and groom," he said, raising his glass. "May your love continue to heal and sustain you both through all the years to come." "To the bride and groom," everyone echoed. As the afternoon turned to evening and the guests began to leave, Delilah and Caleb were finally alone. They stood together in the dining room of the boarding house, now their home, and looked at each other with a mix of happiness and nervousness. "I love you, Mrs. Foster," Caleb said softly. "I love you too, Mr. Foster." He pulled her close and kissed her, and this time there was passion in it as well as tenderness. Delilah responded eagerly, her arms wrapping around his neck, her body pressing against his. They were married now, husband and wife, and tonight they would truly become one. Caleb swept her up into his arms, making her laugh with surprise and delight, and carried her up the stairs to her room, which was now their room. He set her down gently inside and closed the door behind them, and then they were reaching for each other again, kissing with growing urgency. "Are you sure you are ready for this?" Caleb asked, pulling back slightly to look into her eyes. "We can wait if you want to." "I am sure," Delilah said firmly. "I want to be your wife in every way. I want to belong to you, and I want you to belong to me." "I already belong to you," he said. "I have since the moment I rode into town, and you offered to help me." He kissed her again, and they let themselves fall into the love and desire they had been holding back during their courtship. It was a night of discovery and intimacy, of giving and receiving pleasure, of joining their lives together in the most fundamental way. Caleb was gentle and patient, mindful of Delilah's inexperience, and she was amazed by the depth of feeling between them, by how right it felt to be in his arms this way. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Thank you," he said softly into the darkness. "For what? For saving me. For not giving up on me. For loving me when I did not think I deserved to be loved. You gave me my life back, Delilah. I will spend the rest of my days trying to give you the happiness you deserve." "You already make me happy," she said. "Just by being here, by being mine, that is all I need." They drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, and Delilah felt a sense of peace and completion she had never known before. She had found her partner, her love, her home in Caleb. And he had found healing and hope in her. It was a beautiful symmetry, a perfect balance. The months that followed were a time of adjustment and joy as Delilah and Caleb learned to live together as husband and wife. There were small conflicts, of course, as there always are when two people combine their lives. Caleb was used to keeping his own schedule and doing things his own way, and he sometimes forgot to tell Delilah when he would be late coming home from work. Delilah was used to running the boarding house entirely on her own, and she sometimes had trouble letting Caleb help with decisions. But they learned to communicate, to compromise, to put their relationship first. Caleb continued working at the Reynolds ranch, and he was good at his job. Mr. Reynolds came to rely on him more and more, eventually making him the head horse trainer and giving him a raise. With the extra money, Caleb began saving to buy their own place someday. He dreamed of having a small ranch where they could raise horses together, where they could build something of their own. Delilah continued running the boarding house, but now she had help. Caleb pitched in with the heavy work, fixing things that broke, chopping wood, doing repairs. They made a good team, and the boarders commented on how much happier and more welcoming the place felt now that there was a married couple running it. In the spring of their first year of marriage, Delilah discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected it for a few weeks, but when the doctor confirmed it, she felt a rush of excitement and nervousness. She had always wanted children, but now that it was actually happening, she felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She told Caleb that evening when he came home from work. He had been washing up at the pump in the yard, and she walked out to meet him with the news on her lips. "Caleb, I need to tell you something." He straightened, immediately alert to the serious tone in her voice. "What is it?" "Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. In fact, something is very right. We are going to have a baby." For a moment he just stared at her, the words not seeming to register. Then his face broke into the widest, most joyful smile she had ever seen. "A baby? We are having a baby." "Yes." "The doctor confirmed it today. I am about 3 months along. The baby should come in October." He let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around before carefully setting her back down. "This is incredible. This is amazing. We are going to be parents." "We are," she said, laughing at his enthusiasm. "Are you happy about it?" "Happy. I am thrilled. Delilah, this is the best news you could have given me." Then his expression turned serious, tender. "I promise I will be a good father. I will take care of you both, protect you, provide for you. You and this baby are my whole world." "I know you will be a wonderful father," she said, reaching up to cup his face. "I have always known that." The pregnancy progressed well, though Delilah experienced some morning sickness in the early months. Caleb was attentive and caring, bringing her crackers and tea in the mornings, making sure she rested enough, taking on more of the work around the boarding house so she would not overexert herself. As her belly grew, he would talk to it at night, telling the baby stories and singing soft songs, and Delilah would lie there with tears in her eyes, overwhelmed by how much she loved this man. In late October, as the leaves were turning gold and brown, and the air was crisp with the promise of winter, Delilah went into labor. It was a long and difficult birth, lasting through the night and into the next morning, but Caleb stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement and love. When the baby finally arrived just after dawn, the midwife announced, "It is a boy. You have a healthy baby boy." Delilah collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted but elated. A boy. They had a son. Caleb was crying openly, tears streaming down his face as the midwife cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a blanket. Then she placed the infant in Delilah's arms, and both parents stared down in wonder at the tiny person they had created. He was perfect, with a tuft of dark hair and gray eyes that would probably change color, but for now looked exactly like his father's. He had tiny perfect fingers that wrapped around Delilah's thumb, and a rosebud mouth that opened in a yawn. "Hello, little one," Delilah whispered. "Welcome to the world." "He is beautiful," Caleb said, his voice choked with emotion. "He is perfect. What should we name him?" They had discussed names over the past months but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking at their son, Delilah said, "What about Samuel? Samuel Foster." "It means God has heard." "Samuel," Caleb repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Samuel Foster. Hello, Samuel. I am your father, and I love you more than words can say." The baby made a small sound, and both parents laughed through their tears. Delilah had never felt such overwhelming love, such fierce protectiveness. This tiny person was half her and half Caleb, a perfect blend of their love. She looked up at her husband and saw the same emotions reflected in his face. "We made him," she said wonderingly. "We made this perfect little person. We did." Caleb leaned down and kissed her forehead, then the baby's. "Thank you for giving me this gift. Thank you for giving me a family. I never thought I would have this again after I lost Sarah. I thought that part of my life was over. But you gave it back to me. You gave me everything." "We gave it to each other," Delilah said. "We healed each other. We saved each other. And now we have created this beautiful new life together. It is a miracle, Caleb. All of it is a miracle." The days and weeks that followed Samuel's birth were a blur of exhaustion and joy. Delilah was recovering from the birth, and the baby needed constant care, feeding every few hours around the clock. But Caleb was there for all of it, helping with everything he could, walking the floor with Samuel when he cried, changing diapers, bringing Delilah food and water and anything else she needed. Miss Hartley and some of the other women in town came by to help as well, bringing meals and offering to watch Samuel so Delilah could rest. The boarding house ran on a reduced schedule for a few weeks while they adjusted to being new parents, and their regular boarders were understanding and helpful. As Samuel grew, he became the light of their lives. He was a happy baby, quick to smile and slow to fuss. Caleb was a devoted father, coming home from work each day eager to hold his son and play with him. On Sundays, they would go for family walks, with Samuel bundled up in a sling against Caleb's chest, and Delilah would watch her husband talk to their son, pointing out birds and trees and clouds, and her heart would swell with love. When Samuel was 6 months old, Caleb came home one evening with news. "Mr. Reynolds has offered to sell me a portion of his land," he said, his eyes bright with excitement. 20 acres on the north edge of his property along the creek. He said he is getting older and wants to start reducing the size of the operation, and he would rather sell to me than to a stranger. With what we have saved, we can afford it, Delilah. We can buy our own land, build our own home, start our own horse ranch just like we have talked about. Are you serious? This is not just a dream anymore, it is real. We can do this. It will be hard work building a house and starting a ranch from scratch. We will have to keep the boarding house going for a while to have steady income, but we can do it together. We can build something for Samuel, something he can inherit someday. What do you think? "I think it is wonderful," Delilah said, tears of happiness in her eyes. "I think we should do it." So they bought the land, signing the papers in the spring of 1880. It was a beautiful piece of property with rolling grassland, a stand of cottonwood trees along the creek, and a view of the mountains in the distance. They began making plans for the house, deciding where to build it, how big it should be, what features it should have. Caleb worked on the house in every spare moment he had, often with the help of Mr. Reynolds and some of the other ranch hands. They started with a simple frame, 4 rooms downstairs and 2 upstairs, enough space for their family to grow. It took months of hard work, but slowly the house took shape. Delilah would bring Samuel out to the property on weekends, and they would have picnics while watching the progress. By the time Samuel was a year old, the house was finished enough that they could move in. It was not completely done yet. There were still interior details to finish, but it was livable. They held a small gathering to celebrate, inviting their friends from town to see the new place. Everyone was impressed by what Caleb had built, and there was a sense of joy and accomplishment in the air. "This is your home," Caleb said to Delilah that first night as they stood together on the porch of their new house, Samuel asleep in her arms. "I built this for you and Samuel, for our family. Everything I do for you." "I know," she said softly, "and I love you more every day." "Do you remember when you first rode into Fort Davis? You were so broken, so lost. Look at you now. Look at what you have built, the life you have created. You have come so far." "We have come so far," he corrected. "I could not have done any of this without you. You healed my heart, Delilah. You gave me a reason to live again. You gave me hope and love and a future. Everything good in my life is because of you. You give yourself too little credit. You did the hard work of healing. I just helped you along the way." He pulled her close, careful not to squish Samuel between them. "We make a good team." "We do," she agreed. "The best team." They kept the boarding house in town for another year, renting it out to a woman who wanted to run it while Delilah focused on the ranch and raising Samuel. The horse breeding operation began slowly, with just a few mares and a good stallion, but Caleb had a gift for the work, and word spread about the quality of the horses he trained. Soon, they had more business than they could handle, and Caleb had to hire a young man to help him. Samuel grew into a lively, curious toddler, always getting into things and asking questions. He adored his father, following him around the ranch whenever he could, and Caleb was endlessly patient with him, teaching him about horses and cattle and the land. Watching them together, Delilah felt her heart could not possibly hold any more love. When Samuel was 2.5, Delilah discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Caleb was just as excited and attentive as he had been the first time, maybe even more so. He would talk to her belly at night, and Samuel would join in, pressing his little face against his mother's stomach and saying, "Hi, baby," in his sweet toddler voice. In the summer of 1882, their second child was born, another boy. They named him Thomas after Caleb's father. Thomas was different from Samuel, more serious and calm, but just as loved. Samuel was fascinated by his baby brother, wanting to help with everything, and Delilah had to keep a close eye on him to make sure his enthusiasm did not overwhelm the newborn. Life on the ranch settled into a pleasant rhythm. Caleb worked with the horses, Delilah managed the household and kept the books for the ranch, and the boys grew and thrived. They had challenges, of course. There were harsh winters and dry summers, sick animals and tight finances. But they faced everything together, and their love sustained them through the difficult times. One evening when Samuel was 5 and Thomas was 2, Delilah found Caleb sitting on the porch alone, staring out at the sunset. She sat down beside him, taking his hand. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," he said. "I am thinking about that day I rode into Fort Davis, broken and wanting to die. I had given up on life, on happiness, on everything. And then you were there, sweeping your porch, and you looked at me with such kindness. You offered to help me when you had no reason to. You saved my life, Delilah. You would have survived without me," she said gently. "Maybe. But I would not have lived. There is a difference. You taught me that difference. You taught me how to live again, how to love again. You gave me all of this." He gestured to the ranch, the house, the land where their children were playing with a dog they had gotten a few months ago. "You gave me a home and a family and a future. You healed my heart just like you said you would." "Your heart healed mine too," Delilah said. "I did not realize how lonely I was until you came into my life. I thought I was content, but I was just existing, going through the motions. You woke me up. You showed me what real love looks like. We saved each other, Caleb." He pulled her close and kissed her, a slow, sweet kiss full of years of love and trust. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Delilah Foster. I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "I love you too," she whispered. "Always and forever." They sat together as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and watched their sons play in the yard. This was happiness, Delilah thought. This was what life was meant to be. Not perfect, not without struggle, but full of love and hope and joy. She had whispered to a broken cowboy that she would heal his heart, and in doing so, she had found her own heart's healing. They had built a beautiful life together, and she knew that whatever challenges the future held, they would face them side by side. Years passed, and the ranch prospered. Samuel and Thomas grew into strong, capable young men, learning the horse business from their father and helping to expand the operation. The family added a daughter when Delilah was 30, a little girl they named Rose, who was spoiled outrageously by her older brothers and adored by her parents. Caleb never forgot what Delilah had done for him, how she had pulled him back from the brink of despair. Every anniversary, he gave her wildflowers like the ones he had brought her during their courtship, and he told her how grateful he was for her love. And Delilah never forgot the broken man who had ridden into her life and given her a purpose, a passion, a great love. They told their children the story of how they met, how Caleb had been lost, and how Delilah had helped him find his way again. And the children grew up understanding that love was not just a feeling but a choice, an action, a commitment to help each other through the hard times. As they grew older together, their love only deepened. They faced the challenges that all couples face, the illnesses and losses, the disappointments and struggles, but they faced them together always. And when they looked back on their lives, they saw a beautiful tapestry woven from threads of joy and sorrow, triumph and defeat, but always, always love. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Caleb and Delilah sat together on the same porch where they had spent so many evenings over the years. They were in their 50s now, their children grown and starting families of their own. Samuel had taken over most of the ranch operations, Thomas had become a veterinarian and opened a practice in town, and Rose had just announced her engagement to a nice young man from a neighboring ranch. 30 years, Caleb said, shaking his head in wonder. It has gone so fast. And yet it feels like I have known you forever, Delilah said. I cannot remember what my life was like before you were in it. That is because we were always meant to find each other, he said. I believe that now. Even when I was at my lowest, even when I thought my life was over, there was a plan. You were the plan. You were always the plan. We were meant to heal each other, she agreed. We were meant to love each other. He took her hand, the same hand he had held thousands of times over the years, and brought it to his lips. Thank you for healing my heart. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for this beautiful life. Thank you for letting me heal you, she said. Thank you for trusting me with your pain. Thank you for every moment of the past 30 years. I would not change a single thing. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in the brilliant colors they had watched together for 3 decades, Caleb and Delilah sat in comfortable silence. They had started with nothing but pain and hope, and they had built a life full of love and meaning. A broken cowboy had ridden into Fort Davis on a summer day long ago, and a compassionate woman had whispered that she would heal his heart. She had kept that promise, and in return, he had given her everything she had ever wanted. Their story was one of pain transformed into joy, of brokenness made whole, of love conquering despair. It was a story worth living, worth remembering, worth treasuring for all the days of their lives. The ranch continued to thrive under Samuel's management, and Caleb found himself with more free time than he had ever had. He spent his days working with the horses he loved, teaching his grandchildren to ride, and enjoying the quiet moments with Delilah. They traveled a little, taking trips to San Antonio and even once to California to see the ocean. But they always came home to Fort Davis, to the ranch, to the land they had built their life on. As they entered their 60s, health issues began to creep in, as they do for everyone. Caleb developed arthritis in his hands from years of working with horses and leather reins. Delilah had trouble with her eyes and needed spectacles for reading. But they accepted these changes with grace, grateful for every day they had together. Their children gave them many grandchildren, and the ranch house was often full of the sound of young voices and laughter. Caleb loved being a grandfather, loved passing on his knowledge and skills to a new generation. He taught them about horses with the same patience he had shown his own children, and he told them stories of the old days when their grandmother had saved his life with her kindness and love. One spring evening, when Caleb was 67 and Delilah 65, they were sitting on their porch as they had done countless times before. The sunset was particularly beautiful, with pink and gold clouds stretching across the horizon. Caleb was quiet, more so than usual, and Delilah noticed. "What is on your mind?" she asked. He smiled at her, that same tender smile that had warmed her heart for nearly 4 decades. "I was just thinking about how far we have come. Do you remember that first night when I told you I did not think I deserved kindness? When I was so broken I could barely function, I remember," she said softly. "You told me that everyone deserves kindness. You told me you would help me heal. And you did, Delilah. You kept your promise. You healed my heart, and then you filled it so full of love that I thought it might burst. You gave me a reason to live, and then you gave me a life worth living. I do not know what I did to deserve you, but I am grateful every single day that I found you." Delilah felt tears well up in her eyes. "You gave me just as much. You showed me what it means to truly love someone, to build a life with someone. You were a good husband and a wonderful father. You built us this home with your own hands. You worked so hard to give us a good life. I am the lucky one, Caleb Foster." "We are both lucky," he said. "We found each other when we both needed it most. We saved each other." They sat in silence for a while, holding hands, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Delilah felt a profound sense of peace and contentment. This was what she had always wanted, she realized. Not wealth or adventure or excitement, but this. Sitting beside the person she loved most in the world, surrounded by the family they had built together, knowing that they had lived their lives well and loved each other deeply. "I love you," she said quietly. "I love you too," Caleb replied. More than words can ever express. As they grew into their 70s, their health declined further, as was natural. They moved a little slower, tired more easily, needed more rest. Samuel and his wife suggested they move into one of the smaller houses on the ranch property, closer to the main house, where they could be looked after more easily. Caleb and Delilah agreed, understanding that it was practical, but they both felt a pang at leaving the house Caleb had built with his own hands. On the day they moved, Caleb stood in the empty living room of the old house, remembering. He remembered carrying Delilah over the threshold when the house was barely finished. He remembered his children learning to walk on these floors, remembered Christmas mornings and birthday parties and quiet evenings by the fire. He remembered 40 years of love and life. "It is just a building," Delilah said gently, taking his hand. "Our home is wherever we are together. It always has been," he nodded, squeezing her hand. "You are right, as always. Let us go to our new home." The smaller house was comfortable and cozy, perfect for their needs. They settled in quickly, and life continued. Their children and grandchildren visited often, and the ranch remained a hub of activity and family. Caleb and Delilah spent their days in gentle routine: morning coffee on the porch, afternoon naps, evening walks when the weather permitted. They had been together so long that they often did not need words to communicate, understanding each other with looks and gestures. One morning in late spring, when Caleb was 76 and Delilah 74, Caleb did not wake up. He passed peacefully in his sleep, his hand still holding Delilah's as it had every night for almost 50 years. Delilah woke to find him gone, and though her heart broke with the loss, she also felt a strange sense of gratitude. He had not suffered. He had lived a long, full life surrounded by love. And he had died peacefully in his own bed, beside the woman who had healed his broken heart all those decades ago. The funeral was well attended, with people coming from all over the county to pay their respects. Caleb had been respected and loved in the community, known as a fair man, a skilled horseman, a devoted husband and father. Samuel gave the eulogy, speaking about his father's strength and kindness, about the love story that had begun when a broken man rode into town and found healing in the arms of a compassionate woman. "My father always said that my mother saved his life," Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion. "And in a way she did. But he saved hers too. They were two halves of a whole, and together they built something beautiful. They showed us all what true love looks like, not just romance and passion, though they had that, but commitment and partnership and choosing each other every single day. My father lived a good life because my mother loved him, and he made sure to spend every day of his life earning that love and returning it." Delilah sat in the front pew, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, tears streaming down her face. She had known this day would come eventually. She had even been grateful that Caleb went first, because she knew how much he would suffer if he had to lose her. But knowing it was coming did not make it hurt less. She had lost her partner, her love, her best friend. The world felt suddenly smaller and colder without him in it. In the months that followed, Delilah grieved deeply. But she also found comfort in her memories, in the life they had built together, in the family they had created. She spent time with her children and grandchildren, telling them stories about Caleb, keeping his memory alive. And slowly, gradually, the sharp edge of grief softened into something more bearable, a sweet sadness mixed with profound gratitude for the years they had shared. Delilah lived for another 3 years after Caleb's death. She remained active and engaged with her family, though she moved even more slowly and tired even more easily. She never stopped missing Caleb, but she also never regretted a single moment of their time together. When people asked if she was lonely, she would smile and say, "How can I be lonely when I am surrounded by so much love? Caleb and I built this family together. He is still here in every one of these faces, in every kind deed, in every moment of love. He is still with me." On a warm summer evening, much like the evening when Caleb had first ridden into Fort Davis, Delilah passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was 77 years old, and her last thoughts were of Caleb, of the life they had shared, of the love that had sustained her through everything. Samuel found her the next morning, and though he wept for the loss of his mother, he also smiled through his tears. She looked peaceful, he thought, almost happy. He liked to think that she had gone to find his father, that they were together again now, reunited in whatever came after this life. Delilah and Caleb were buried side by side in the small cemetery outside Fort Davis, their graves marked with simple stones that bore their names and the dates of their lives. But their real legacy was not in stone or in the land they had owned. Their legacy was in the family they had raised, the love they had shared, the example they had set for all who knew them. They had shown that even the deepest wounds could heal with time and love, that broken hearts could be made whole again, that hope and kindness could overcome despair and grief. Years after they were both gone, their great-grandchildren would sit on the porch of the ranch house and listen to stories about the great love story of Caleb and Delilah Foster. They would hear about how he had ridden into town broken and lost, how she had offered to heal his heart, how they had built a beautiful life together through hard work and devotion. The story became family legend, passed down through generations, a reminder that love was the most powerful force in the world, capable of healing even the deepest wounds. The ranch remained in the family for generations, though it changed and evolved with the times. But the house that Caleb built with his own hands was preserved and maintained, turned into a kind of family museum where descendants could visit and remember the two people who had started it all. In the living room hung a portrait of Caleb and Delilah, painted from a photograph taken on their 25th anniversary. In the picture, they were sitting together on their porch, holding hands, smiling at each other with such obvious love that it warmed the hearts of everyone who saw it. And on the porch itself, the very same porch where they had spent thousands of evenings together, where Caleb had first told Delilah he was falling in love with her, where they had shared their hopes and dreams and fears, there was a small plaque. It read, "Here began the healing. Here grew the love. Here lived Caleb and Delilah Foster, whose hearts healed each other and whose love built a legacy that will last forever." It was a fitting tribute to a love that had started with whispered words of hope and had grown into something extraordinary. A cowboy had ridden into Fort Davis broken and lost, and a woman had whispered that she would heal his heart. She had kept that promise, and in return, he had given her a lifetime of love and devotion. Together, they had created something beautiful and lasting, proof that even in the harsh and unforgiving landscape of the Wild West, love could flourish and grow and transform lives. Their story was complete, their ending happy, their legacy secure. They had lived and loved and left the world better than they found it. What more could anyone ask for?